up where the last one left off at. Alright, sorry we lost battery power, and then I'm going to give my commentary. Alright, we're back.
Actually, the only worry that we would have is really if any actions taken against the Bushehr nuclear reactor, which produces electricity, and that's not on Israel's target list because it would cause a radiological disaster. From last night's raid on the Iraq nuclear reactor, there was no concern of radiation because the reactor was not yet fueled. And then when we're talking about enriched uranium or other uranium compounds, those are only going to pose a very local threat to, for example, workers or rescue teams going on the ground. They would just need to wear protective gear for a while, and then the chemicals and limited alpha particles would dissipate.
What questions do you have moving forward? I've been asking my own questions, I've been showing the audience's questions, but you follow this stuff closer than just about anybody. What questions do you have in the coming days?
I would like to know if Iran is going to make a deal, and if it has 2 weeks, maybe it has less, maybe Trump is bluffing here. They need to agree to fully dismantle their enrichment, their weaponization, and their missile delivery programs under international monitoring. I think that has to be the bottom line for the United States, and that is exactly what Trump demanded back in February when he gave them 60 days to negotiate. On that 61st day is when Israel struck. So I think the Ayatollah needs to take this off-ramp, but it remains to be seen if he will in fact go down with the ship as it sinks.
Andrea Stricker is the Deputy Director of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy's Non-Proliferation and Biodefense Program. Thanks for the informative interview. We'll be in touch soon.
Thank you.
All right. So, we continue to monitor these live vantage points out of cities like Tel Aviv. The time here in the States, 7:25 Pacific time, 10:25 on the East Coast. Live look at the White House. Israel Standard Time, about 5:25 in the morning. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to be joined by Project Dynamo in a moment. They've been working to evacuate Americans from the danger zone. We return in a...
The Israeli and the IDF are shifting into a higher gear to strike inside Iran, and the domino effect that could topple the revolutionary guards in Iran has already begun. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host, Yair Pinto, and on this show, we report about all the truth of what is happening in Israel. This is the 5th day of the direct war against the revolutionary guards in Iran. The IDF reported that in the overnight strikes in western Iran, launchers and missiles and other silos were targeted, leading to the destruction of additional units following an announcement on Monday that as much as 1/3 of Iran's missile launching capability has already been taken out. This is the result of Israel's policy of actively hunting for these launchers and the missiles that can be loaded onto them, along with the Revolutionary Guards officers who know how to use this equipment. So the Revolutionary Guards headquarters were also hit last night, along with several anti-aircraft launchers and radar systems, as the Israeli IDF and Air Force continues to operate in the heart of Iran and to exact a heavy price from the Ayatollah regime. This has added to the generally chaotic situation in Tehran, which also included the assassination of the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps intelligence chief, and his deputy, and the pickup panic, including the live broadcast attack on a TV studio related to the Ayatollah regime, and the sewage wave, and much more. Amidst all of this, there are reports of attempts to mobilize the Iranian military, but this is being hampered by confusion and broken lines of communication. And meanwhile, Iranian media reported the closure of the Tehran-Qom highway after a missile hit that area, and air defensive systems were activated Wednesday at the Iranian nuclear facility in Natanz. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said at the press conference on Monday evening that Iran is losing, and a small number of missiles fired at Israel overnight were all intercepted. This follows the thundering threat from the Ayatollah regime that they would hit Israel with the largest attack in history, which didn't materialize. But it is possible that they have adopted the tactics of the Houthis.
Like I said, I screened these videos before I played them up here. Let's see what else we got. From my understanding, they ain't got shit there. This is like some George Bush shit. Trump, what are you doing, man? You don't want to be remembered like how George Bush was remembered? George Bush is remembered for 9/11 and invading Iran to protect his oil reserves. Trump, you don't want to be remembered like that. He's got 3 more years, bro. Forget about this shit. Let them do their thing, whatever. Let them build their nuclear power plant, whatever. It's not our problem, Trump. You're still my homie, you're still my president, but bro, I need you to focus on this country, not Iran and their problems.
On June 13, 2025, Israel launched a series of large-scale precision strikes targeting Iran's nuclear and military infrastructure. The operation was codenamed Rising Lion. After months of research, we've mapped out these secret Iranian nuclear sites, some hidden deep underground, others in plain sight. Each location reveals part of the bigger picture. But more importantly, we need to understand why Israel is so determined to halt Iran's nuclear enrichment, which according to Israeli intelligence, Iran's centrifuge may be just days away from producing a nuclear bomb. Not to forget the detailed process of how they are made. Iran has several nuclear programs, but let's take a look at some of the key underground facilities. First, we have Fordo Nuclear Program. It is an enrichment site built into a mountain, providing better protection against potential bombardment compared to the fuel enrichment plant. The second site is the Natanz Nuclear Facility. It houses several facilities, including 2 enrichment stations, the vast underground fuel enrichment plant, and the above-ground pilot fuel enrichment refinery. The third nuclear facility is Isfahan, the largest nuclear technology center located on the outskirts of the city. It includes the fuel plate fabrication plant and a uranium conversion facility capable of processing uranium into uranium hexafluoride, which is then fed into centrifuges. The fourth nuclear site is Kandab. Iran has a partially built heavy water research reactor here, originally called Arak, but now known as Kandab. Finally, we have Bushehr, Iran's only operational nuclear power plant located on the Gulf Coast. It uses Russian fuel, which is then returned to Russia once spent, thereby reducing the proliferation risk. Let's take a look at a simplified version of how Iran's nuclear extraction and enrichment process works. This is the uranium ore, and it is extracted using a drill that pulls the reamer up to the pilot hole, widening it. The broken ore then falls into what is known as an extraction chamber. Next, a bulldozer, operated remotely to keep the operator at a safe distance from falling rock hazards, picks up the uranium rock. Fast forward, the uranium is then condensed, ground, and placed into a centrifuge for further enrichment. Everyone is talking about centrifuge enrichment, but let's explore how it actually works. In this visualization, the green dots represent uranium-238 atoms, while the blue dots represent the concentration of uranium-235 atoms. This first batch is natural uranium, which contains only 0.7% of uranium-235. Here, in this image, we have 5% low-enriched uranium, which is used for commercial nuclear power plants. Finally, we have weapons-grade uranium, which contains 90% uranium-235. As you can see, almost all the uranium-238
There's Shivity. What's up, Shivity? Alright, now that we got Shivity in the house.
Representing the color blue.
Alright, here. That's not important. Like I said, a lot of these videos I pre-screened it. From what I've been seeing, Iran ain't got shit. They ain't got no nuclear shit. And a little bit of nuclear, whatever they do have, let them put to it. Bullshit. I call bullshit. Just like Afghanistan was a war we had to go into, right? No. Get the B-52s out of there. Why are we spending money to send B-52s to go bomb Iran, Trump? That's not right. You need to back off on that, man. That's not right. You're still my president. I still support 98% of everything you're doing, but This is not this is not something you need to be worried about, President Trump. You need to be worried about us here in America, the American citizens. This is not our problem. We can keep protecting it. I get it. The U.S. government has protected Israel for years. Whatever. Let's keep protecting them. But going and bombing Iran, that's Trump. You need to focus on America first and the gas. Don't focus on this. This is over. You're overdoing yourself with this, man. I don't agree with this, and I think a lot of other Americans do not agree with this.
For 10 nuclear bombs.
Right now.
And yeah, right now, yes. They have increased the processing.
The camera messed up, sorry.
Advanced centrifuges.
Flip, what the hell? Hold on.
In an escalatory fashion, because they are going to become states. And, you know, this is like much harder to negotiate, especially when they have a nuclear weapon, as we've learned with North Korea. And if Iran,
Yeah, but North Korea got put in their place.
the Middle East will never be the same.
Let them have a nuclear power plant. I don't know if that's what they're trying to build, is a nuclear power plant, but whatever. Yeah, right here he said, oh, nuclear plant, not power plant, but still. They've been saying this shit since 95, literally. I did research on this, and I'm doing more so I can speak on facts, because I don't like spewing out word of mouth, secondhand shit.
Enrichment all across the country. And this has created a real challenge for Israel.
And don't think this is my dislike for Trump, anyone. I like everything Trump's doing except this. And nobody's going to agree with everything the president does. There's going to be no president ever that everyone will agree with every single thing they do. But I think the majority of Americans do not agree with this. I'm pretty sure.
And they have been playing this game with the United Nations and with the United States and Israel for decades. And it's now, I think the time has now come to an end.
So I want people to know also, as we take a look back at the wall
Can you guys
again,
hear it okay?
why this is our fight too. And we know
why is this our fight?
Back to the 80s, they've been killing Americans through their proxy.
But we've been having Iran do the same shit, everyone. Iran's been doing the same shit. Iran's basically our hitman. Or not Iran. Israel is basically our hitman. Israel does our dirty deeds that we don't want to do. All the dirty shit that we don't want to do, just like Iran does it, Israel does it for us. So all the dirty shit Israel's doing for their people, Iran's doing for America. So you can't do a double standard like that.
Living great lives, living off the backs of that success. And then, Brian, I want to bring you in here. People think, well, we had a problem with Iraq, we don't want to fix Iraq. A lot of the problem with Iraq is the insurgency sponsored, restrained, financed, and directly supported by Iran. It's a big deal. They say estimated 603 Americans dead on thanks to that blood on their hands.
Yeah, I'm trying to
Yes, that is the word of General Counsel Soleimani when President Trump took off the battlefield in the first term. He organized training against all of these proxies in Iraq that are directly responsible for killing 603 American soldiers, as you said, Brian. And then on top of that, we're talking about thousands who were seriously gravely injured. And so this is a regime that has been at war with the United States for over 40 years and have killed well over 1,000 Americans through its proxies.
Brian, I know you have great respect for the President of the United States, and he has for you. But what would you like to see him do from the intelligence that you have right now?
Well, the President's doing an excellent job of kind of letting events come his way. And he's, my experience...
What did I say about why this is our problem? Because there are because so wait, this guy basically just said this is our problem because Iran's basically all the other countries that don't like us, they do their dirty work. But Israel supposedly does the same shit for us. Israel's doing our dirty work that we don't want to do.
To rescue them who were embarrassed. And then a couple of years later, in Beirut, Hezbollah is taking control of that country.
AJ?
The bombing that killed 17 Americans. And then the ones ultimately under Reagan that killed 241. Up into Israel, killed the culprits that were still alive. A few months ago, they've been living great lives, living off the backs of that success. And then, Brian, I want to bring you in here. People think, well, we had a problem with Iraq, we don't replicate Iraq.
A lot of the problem with Iraq was the insurgency sponsored and trained, financed, and directly supported by the Iranians. What did they do? They say estimated 603 Americans dead on thanks to them, blood on their hands.
Yes, that is the work of General Qasem Soleimani, whom President Trump took off the battlefield in the first term. He organized, trained, and equipped all of these proxies in Iraq that are directly responsible for killing 603 American soldiers, as you said, Brian. And then on top of that, we're talking about thousands who were seriously, gravely injured. And so this is a regime that has been at war with the United States for over 40 years and have killed well over 1,000 Americans through its proxies.
I keep leaning in to be able to talk because my wife's sleeping right now, and that's also why the camera keeps moving, and every time I keep leaning it in where I have it propped up, it falls. So basically, like I said, they're doing the same shit. They're doing the same shit that basically, they're doing the same shit Israel does for America. The dirty work.
With the Iranian regime that addresses its nuclear program, and he has made clear dozens of times that Iran cannot enrich.
I'm not for either one of these countries, but my point of this video is we need to be focusing on us, not them.
Iran is enriching at the levels of almost 90%. You only need 2 to 3% for peaceful nuclear power. So the Iranian regime is lying. And
Israel's lying too. They won't let us go check the stability, and they won't let us do They won't let anyone do safety checks in Israel on their nuclear weapons. So Israel's in the wrong too.
Inevitable clash, and not taking this opportunity. I know there's downsides to it and risk, but I don't think it's an historic window. Brian, I look forward to talking to you throughout the crisis. I'm Steve Ducey. I'm Brian Kilney.
And I'm Ainsley
And my
Earhart.
zoom's a little
Click here
fucked
to
up too, that's why
subscribe to
when
the Fox News YouTube.
now like I said, there's another video I want to show too. Hold on. Ah, this is a new one that just popped up. This wasn't here, I didn't see this one. This one's new, so this ain't here. So this one's claiming they have a little stockpile going of, what do you call it? Of uranium or whatever. But like I said, this is not our battle. They ain't gonna be able to put any of that shit on a plane and hurt us. What we need to be worried about is what Joe Biden did. How many fucking Iranians that are, you know how they're saying Iran does the dirty work for the other countries that don't like us, just like Israel does the dirty work for the countries that we don't like and that we don't want to do. Israel does our dirty work, so Iran does the dirty work for the opposite countries that don't like us. So, what did you just say? Wait, I was saying something like that. Hang on.
Turn to Mike Tobin with the very latest on
Yes, I met to what they just said. Hold on.
Good morning, Carly. Good morning, Todd. Once again, southern Israel took a hit from an Iranian missile. It hit in the town of...
Either way, I just remember what I was going to say. So what I was going to say is, alright, so they got a little stockpile. No matter what, that little stockpile of uranium they got, if they do even somehow manage to want to put it on a warhead instead of using it for a nuclear power plant, they ain't gonna get that shit over here. We don't gotta be worried about that. What we need to be worried about is the Iranian sleeper cells that came in under Joe Biden's administration that are probably all living in one of them immigration shelters, if not an immigration shelter, in an apartment with probably like 10 to 15 of them in it. That's what we need to be worried about. The sleeper cells that are already in this country that can do harms to Americans. That's what we need to be worried about. The Red Dawn type shit, the ones that are already in our country, that's what we need to be worried about, not this shit.
Beersheba, very near an apartment and an industrial complex, causing fire and damage on the ground. No reports of injuries. There are reports that this single missile made its way through the air defenses because one of the interceptors malfunctioned. There were no reports of injuries yet. Beersheba is the same town where yesterday a missile hit the Soroka hospital, resulting in dozens of minor injuries, some of them serious. The Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency tells me in an exclusive interview, Iran does have enough uranium for several nuclear bombs, and the regime is just a quick step away from enriching to weapons-grade uranium. However, he said he saw no plans for Iran to take that step. And he believes even at this stage, diplomacy is the path to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon.
I believe that there is a way to
What we need to be worried about is the Iranians in our country that Joe Biden fucking let in.
In a negotiated way with a very robust, as I said, I've been in conversations, very good conversations with Steve Witkoff and with the Iranians as well. I believe that there are ways in which we can make sure that Iran does not get a nuclear weapon.
Now, Israel reports every day their fighters and drones are taking out missile systems in Iran. Today, we have images of that. The IDF says strikes were carried out in the areas of Isfahan and Tehran, saying the equipment that you see in these images are both radar installations and missile systems intended to strike Israeli aircraft. For days now, Israel says that their fighters have enjoyed air superiority, meaning they can operate at will in the skies over Iran without the risk of being shot down. Carly and Todd?
Okay, Mike Tobin live for us in Tel Aviv. Mike, thank you. Let's bring in Ben Taliblu, Iran Program Senior Director and Senior Fellow for the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Beham, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. So yesterday we also learned that President Trump is going to make his final decision within 2 weeks on whether or not the U.S.
I bet you he makes the decision on the 4th of July. Let's see if I'm right. What do you think, Shivity? Do you think I'll make that decision on the 4th of July?
I think all eyes will be on President Trump and on the U.S. in these 2 weeks, but given that deadline, it gives the Israelis significant time to continue to erode the long-range strike capabilities and really defang the Iranian missile, military, and nuclear apparatus. So should the president decide to enter, the U.S. actually has less work here. So this is consistent both with the president's
No, we don't need to enter there. We don't need to do anything there. This isn't our problem. We need to get the gas prices down. We need to make America strong. This is not our fucking problem. We don't need to be fucking spending money on this bullshit.
Which is destroy Fort.
Well, a covert op designed to carry
And
out
don't take this as anybody. Trump's still not my president. Trump's still my president. Nobody's going to agree with everything a president does. Nobody's going to agree with every little thing a president does. But this is something I strongly disagree with. But everything else, there's one other thing. There's like 1 or 2 other things I don't agree with that Trump's doing. But the majority of everything he's doing, I agree with. Except for a few things here and there.
For the Iranians to realize how much of a bind they are, how much they have critically lost, and how much President Trump is giving them one last chance before really hitting pedal to the metal here. To be honest, just looking objectively as an outsider, the only thing that is standing between the collapse of this regime and certain death is President Trump.
What's up?
So President
How you
Trump has
doing? Good morning, Thomas the Tank.
Dismantle or else.
So, do you agree with me that we shouldn't be Israel or Iran should not be our problem? We should continue maybe defending Israel, but beyond that, we shouldn't be doing anything more. We should be worrying about our country and making them citizens in our country rich, not spending money on this stupid shit. Sending B-52 bombers over there. This is stupid. We should not be spending money on this.
Why the Israelis witnessed and sense that this is a sense of opportunity. The fact that Hezbollah and Hamas have been deracinated and neutered. The fact that the U.S. has been dealing with the Houthis. The fact that the Shia militias in Iraq
Those damn Houthis again.
or whose firing was not necessarily impactful throughout the course of the wars of the post-October 7th Middle East, and that the Islamic Republic lost one major leg of its conventional deterrence. Conversely, as you see with the missile strategy not performing as well either, the other leg of the regime's conventional deterrence had fallen in. And given the fact that the regime is weak at home, economically bankrupt, socially has little to no base at home, this is all why the Israelis sense that this was now or never.
I want to add something to all the ills that the current regime is undergoing right now. Despite talk of these ongoing negotiations, do we really believe that an 86-year-old religious zealot, quite frankly, to your point in that last answer, with absolutely nothing to lose, is really going to negotiate? That's my big concern here.
Well, the real art of the deal for the president is to make this 86-year-old zealot that you mentioned, which is the Middle East's longest-running contemporary dictator, to do exactly what his predecessor did, which he called drinking from the poison chalice, or settling for a suboptimal solution, forcing him to do what he doesn't want to do. But in the case that his ideology almost certainly overwhelms his pragmatism and his desire for survival, that he should know that the U.S. has all the capability and all the intent to really help make a nation that is a 88 million person nation not any longer be a hostage to that 86 year-old individual.
We already showed a little bit of the celebration that took place in New Jersey when Ida and Alexander came home yesterday. We'll show a little bit more in the show as it progresses. But how do you think that this war with Iran is impacting the remaining hostages in Gaza?
Well, there are some folks who are saying it's overshadowing it completely. I don't see that at all the case. If you're going after the sponsor of the
Can you guys hear it okay?
proxies that the regime has created or co-opted in the Middle East, you're doing the right thing because you're disconnecting the dots between the patron and the proxy. And the more pressure you have on the patron, the more leverage actually Israel has on the proxy, be that in the Gaza Strip with Hamas or any other one that it seems to be fighting occasionally Hezbollah in the north still. This is actually leverage that Israel has that should be able to press to get hostages back.
We will be watching it all. Ben Humben and Tony Blue, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm Steve Ducey. I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart.
Right, I had another video too. Didn't change it yet that I already watched. Check out this one. This one I haven't watched
Right
yet.
now, President Trump saying he thinks he could decide in the next 2 weeks whether the U.S. will
4th
strike
of
Iran,
July.
keeping it open a chance for
I
more
agree,
negotiations.
Fox reporter Hansen now with more.
After a week of fighting between Israel and Iran, President Trump is leaving another 2 weeks to decide if the U.S. will intervene. The president is keeping hope alive for diplomacy.
The president is saying that he will make a decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks. It's very clear and direct.
President Trump has maintained that Iran cannot have a
we don't
nuclear
need to
weapon.
go.
It has been widely reported only the U.S. has a powerful enough bunker buster bomb to destroy an Iranian nuclear site deep underground. Israel destroyed other sites and killed several Iranian military leaders. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke after Iranian missiles hit a large hospital, injuring hundreds.
He would use these weapons to wipe Israel off the map. Well, he's not going to. We're not going to let him.
China has called for an end to the fighting. Its ambassador to the U.S. wrote, quote, China stands ready to continue enhancing communication and coordination with all parties. But as the world waits to see if the Iranian regime picks up negotiations, some in the Islamic Republic are ready for change. The nation's exiled crown prince spoke to Fox News.
The control apparatus of the regime is almost collapsing, and we see more and more of that sort of reports that are coming to us from personnel within the military or intelligence.
Iran's foreign minister is reportedly traveling to Geneva to meet with European counterparts. In New York, Connor Hansen, Fox News.
He's like that jab out from fucking Ukraine, trying to start World War III and get other countries involved.
Some of the flights are landing in Tampa.
The guy going
this video shows one of
Europe.
the flights chartered by Governor Ron DeSantis. The goal is to get 1,500 Americans out of Israel. The first journey for some was to a cruise ship to Cyprus before flying to Tampa International Airport. Some parents waiting at the airport were very happy to see their children.
Relief. I'm just overwhelmed. You know, he's a staff member. His is probably his 10th trip to Israel, and so he has to be calm for the kids because he had a group of 30 with him, and I'm just elated that he's finally back on U.S. soil.
The governor is scheduled to be at the Tampa airport to hold a news conference after greeting a flight arriving from Israel, and we will have live coverage coming up here for you in our next half hour.
There was a video I wanted to show you guys. Let's see if it's still up here.
In Tel Aviv on what is now early morning in Israel. Trey.
Yeah, Trace, good evening. Overnight, Israel launched a series of strikes, according to the IDF, using dozens of fighter jets to target different positions across Iran, not only hitting the country's nuclear program and their ballistic missile supply, but also targeting individual leadership, including the head of the IRGC, Hussein Salami. This is the top military general in all of Iran, and according to Iranian state media, he is dead. There is currently a state of emergency declared across the entirety of Israel as this country braces for...
What did they just say was dead?
Their ballistic missile supply, but also targeting individual leadership, including the head of the IRGC, Hussein Salami. This is the top military general in all of Iran.
Oh, the top military general in Iran's dead.
He is dead. There is currently a state of emergency declared across the entirety
Yeah,
of
they probably
Israel
need to kill
as
him
this
in all
country
fairness.
braces for an expected Iranian response. I spoke tonight with an Israeli source who discussed what took place earlier in the evening. This source said Israel was able to surprise Iran. Israel managed to hit several targets in the heart of Tehran and to eliminate multiple senior Iranian regime leaders simultaneously in different spots. Now, at this hour, there are reports of additional explosions taking place in the Iranian capital of Tehran, an indication that the Israelis are continuing those waves of strikes. But again, the question now is, how will the Iranians respond? Israel has a variety of air defense systems, from David Sling to the Arrow 2 and 3 systems. They also have Patriot missile defense systems and a THAAD system supplied by the United States. But as we saw during an Iranian missile attack back in October that included hundreds of ballistic missiles, this is not a perfect system. And it's part of the reason that Israel's Home Front Command, the branch of the military responsible for communicating with civilians, has ordered everyone in this country to stay close to bomb shelters. This is not a question of if Iran will respond, but rather when and where. We do expect the targets to be extensive, but Israel has prepared for this for not only months, but years. This was something that the Israelis said would have to happen if Iran's nuclear program continued to advance toward a nuclear weapon. We know President Trump tried to pursue as many diplomatic opportunities as possible. His Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, going back and forth to the region in Oman and Europe.
They've been trying to advance to a nuclear weapon since the year fucking 1995. If they haven't been able to do it since 1995 and we're in 2025, I don't think they're going to still be able to do it anytime soon. This is all bullshit, and I don't know why. I mean, I get it why the U.S. government is doing it, but Trump, man, you need to lay off and make your own path like you have been, and stop following what everyone did before you, and just chill out on this Israel thing and focus on America first. This has nothing to do with America first. Even if Iran does somehow miraculously build a nuclear bomb, I don't think we gotta worry about it here in America. This is not our freaking problem, Trump.
5 separate times meeting with Iranian counterparts, trying to get together some sort of agreement, but the Israelis said that they were too close to a nuclear weapon, according to sources that we have talked to.
Bullshit.
And again, the decision was made tonight to strike Iranian nuclear facilities. The latest information that we have, the Israeli cabinet met tonight. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the nation about what is taking place, but we do not expect this to be over in a short period of time. This is likely going to take a matter of weeks before it is complete, and we do expect Iranian missiles to target Israeli cities in possibly the hours or days ahead.
Magnum 11. My homie Shivity is going to answer your questions, okay?
We appreciate it. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page.
No. Subscribe to my YouTube page. Like, subscribe, share to mine. Oh, this is interesting.
You've always said that you don't believe Iran should be able to have a nuclear weapon, but how close do you personally think that they were to getting one? Because Tulsi Gabbard...
I don't think they are. I disagree with you, Trump. I mean, maybe you've got some intelligence I don't, but...
I don't care what she said. I think they were very close to having... Remember, Iran came out...
I mean, Trump, I don't know if you're trying to pull some George Bush shit right now, but...
They just can't have a nuclear weapon.
You've always said that...
This isn't our fight, President Trump. And I still support you, but this is one issue I do not support what you're doing on.
Everybody, Peter Zion here, coming to you from the
here. Does Iran actually have a nuclear weapon? From boots on the ground in Iran.
My seatbelt, letting my kids fight without a helmet? You bet.
Everybody, Peter Zion here, coming to you from the Ratuzy Banansky in Poland, with Tyler in downtown Poznan. A lot of you have written in about some of the news that's coming about, from Iran about the potential of them actually having an active nuclear weapon at this point. I need to take some air out of that argument. First of all, these announcements are coming from members of parliament in Iran that are ultra-nationalists. So it's kind of like having Cory Bush or Marjorie Taylor Greene announce policies for the government. So, don't take that too seriously.
Exactly.
But more importantly, the technology that's in question here, it's not clear it's something that the Iranians can do. Now, I know that sounds a little weird.
That's what I've been saying.
Agencies across the West warning about the
this is why I feel like Trump's trying to pull some George Bush shit for some stupid reason, man.
supposedly...
That's not how you want to be remembered. It's how George Bush was remembered as a president, Mr.
And at
Trump.
some point, it's not just an issue of putting up or shutting up. It's an issue of dissecting the technology that's in question and what is actually necessary. So to have a uranium explosive device, you have to do something that's called implosion, which is basically having a series of very precision-milled explosive plates that surround a plutonium or uranium core and all explode in at the same time in order to
get on those
compress
comments for me.
the sphere of enriched material, which then triggers a runaway chain reaction that triggers the actual mushroom cloud. This is harder than it sounds, because if you have any flaw in that, or if one of the plates doesn't go up at exactly the right time, then you don't get that implosion, and the explosion, instead of bubbling in, goes out through one of those spots, and then the nuclei never come to light, and you never actually get the nuclear reaction.
This all
So
lies.
getting
Yeah, I
this
do
all
agree
right
with
is
you
very
on that.
difficult.
How about you,
something that,
Shivity?
yes, the United States figured out in the 40s, and other countries have cracked the code since, but that doesn't mean it's easy. And there is no sign at this point that the Iranians have figured out how to do that. Because if you did do it, not only would you get a nuclear explosion, but you would be able to detect that with, say, earthquake monitors. So from the point that that happens, you then enter into this really weird spot where you demonstrate the
I agree.
atom.
The guy that wrote in all Chinese. Why is everyone else allowed to have nuclear weapons but not Iran? I agree with you, and I'm pretty sure Shivity does
This is
too.
going to be fairly large, fairly heavy, and difficult to hurl at someone. So if you demonstrated that you can capture the power of the atom but not deliver it, that is the time when
No, Trump's only got some weird issue with this. I don't know why, but the other stuff he hasn't lied on, and he's been pulling through on all of his promises, and I've been following very closely what he's been doing. He's been doing exactly what I voted him to do, except for this Iran bullshit.
So the question is whether they can do it or not. I would say they can't, because they haven't.
Yes, he has. He's been anti-war the whole time. Just something with this Israel shit. I don't know if he saw us.
So, am I concerned about Iran for any number of reasons? Sure. This doesn't make my list. Now,
I was interrupting him. This is important what he's saying. But back to what I was saying real quick. To the one comment here. The guy in Chinese, where'd it go? I agree with you. Right, why can't Iran have nuclear weapons? And I don't even think they got them, but if they did. Okay, we left off at Magnum 1, Magnum 11, yes, he's been anti-war, except up until whatever this goofy shit is. And I still don't think and he's still not sending troops on the ground. He's just talking about sending some some B-52s over there to bunker bomb some fucking mountains that probably don't even got anything in it. I'll let this guy finish explaining in 1 second. I'm just reading the comments. God is good. Stephen Gammon. Oh yeah, I'm shouting you out right now. Sorry, I'm pausing this. I'm gonna get back to the video in a second. I'm shouting you out right now. Where was that comment? Where'd it go? Magnum 11. I gave you a shout out. I just leave up. Oh, Stephen Thompson. Shout me out. What the fuck? I shout you out, Stephen. I'm sorry I said your name wrong. Stephen Tomlinson. Sorry if I pronounced your last name wrong. Then we got Rhea. I can't say your name. I don't even know how to say your name, sorry. You don't have any intelligence. You're right. I don't have any intelligence, but I do got what this guy's saying. Who knows if he's right. And from all the stuff I've seen and did some research on, Iran, I don't really think they got nuclear. And even if they do got nuclear weapons, we need to be worried about the sleeper cells that are currently in America. To the next comment, Greg Gorman. God is not doing anything. He let us make our own decisions, aka he will say stuff and see after the right to review your choices. I don't even believe in God, so continuing on. I almost died from aspiration pneumonia on the holiday weekend. I got aspiration pneumonia. I got mountain sickness coming down from a mountain. And I probably should believe in God, but I still don't. Anyways. Rob Shirley. Owie. Spot on, brother. Thank you. Stephen Tassin, I love Trump too. I agree with you. I love Trump except what he's doing with Israel. I do not like what he's doing with Israel. I think he needs to be focused on America first, and this spending all this money with sending these warships over there and sending everything over there, the B-52 bombers and all that. This isn't where we need. Our country is billions of dollars in debt. Like Trump, what the hell are you doing, man? Why are we spending all this money on this? This is not our fight. This is not something we need to be worried about. We need to be worried about getting our national debt paid down, bringing down the price of gas, not this stupid shit. All this is doing is raising our national debt because we're paying for all that fuel, all them soldiers, all the army equipment and all that. I don't know how much the bombs, the bunker bombs cost, but I'm sure it's trillions or millions of dollars, these bunker bombs. This is not what we need to be spending our money on. Our country is billions upon millions of dollars in debt. This is not our problem. Trump? Okay, continuing on. I love Trump though still, but I do not love this issue. I don't agree with him. I like about almost everything he's doing. There's a couple things I don't agree with, but no president anybody will ever agree with 100% of what a president does. Joshua said Trump is the GOAT. Okay. Stephen Thompson, this page is goofy. Okay, whatever. MRKY, still issue. You need more info and it sounds like you're misinformed. Reach cat REACHKNKENW. Yeah, I'm doing my research now on it. I don't have all the research yet. Earlier I was just talking out of my ass, but I have done a lot of research on it since I was talking out of my ass in the earlier lives. McKay, love you, Manny. Okay, thank you. S3 Designs US, Reach Ken W, whatever that means. MK, it's all about love, guys. MKs, please stop the disrespectful comments. I agree, thank you. Please tell them to stop the disrespectful comments. This is a peaceful chat where we're talking about this issue of what I've been talking about the whole time, so let's keep the comments respectful. Thank you for that. JD March, my kitten name is Trump. That's badass that you named your kitten Trump. That's pretty cool. Trump's your kitty. That's cool. I like it. That's a good name. If I had a dog, I'd name my dog Trump. Curtis Watson, did someone research on laugh my ass off? That name I can't say again. Ricochet, how do you say that? We're screwed either way. Okay, Joshua, this guy is going to hell. Who's going to hell? The guy that's about to speak. Did I pause? Jeffrey, question, is your hair blue or broccoli shaped? Or do you support Trump? I support Trump. I just don't support what he's doing with Israel. I think we need to be focused on our country and America first. We do not need to be focused on Israel. But overall, like I said, I like Trump still my president. Still my homie. MK, I'm God-fearing man with a foundation in glory. You got a glory hole, okay. McKay, are you cold or gay? I'm straight. I got my lady next to me sleeping in bed. Jeffrey, he can afford that with the money he saved in corruption so far. What the hell are you talking about, Jeffrey? Save what? What are you talking about? Oh, you know Trump's first term, he didn't collect one payment for being the president, and he gave it all to charity, all that money. You do realize that, right, Joshua? McKay, hi. Rabbi K said hi. I'm trying to have him get through these comments so this guy can finish talking without me interrupting him. Vibrant Razer, hi. McKay, it's pronounced Marky Mark. Okay, I'll just call you Marky Mark then. Alright, Marky Mark. Then we're on to Kevin Josie. Are you cold or gay? I'm straight. Again, Kevin Jones said hi. Wait, is that you? Not Marky Mark. Richaw Q. He's trying to do peace through strength. He gave Iran 60 days to give up the enrichment. It will be their fault if they don't stop enrichment. Well, Rinch knew Here's the only, sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, Wrench New. Here's the thing, though. Why can't Iran have nuclear weapons? Why can't they have a nuclear power plant? What if they're just trying to build a nuclear power plant? I know they do their dirty deeds just like Israel does America's dirty deeds that we don't want to get our hands dirty on, and Israel goes out and does our dirty bids. Iran does the same shit for the country who hates us. So they're both fucking doing the same shit, just for different sides. On to the next comment. Paul K. Hi. Oh, cool. We got someone watching from Scotland. What's up? Like, subscribe, share. Hit thumbs up if this is your first time coming across the channel. I'm going to play this in a minute and let this guy explain. I'm just trying to hurry and rush through the comments here. Jeffrey, you were complimenting about spending gas going over there. Although you were complaining about spending gas going over there. Yeah, that was kind of funny. Well, I'm just saying, man, Trump needs to be focused on getting these gas prices down in America, rebuilding rebuilding our fallen cities like Detroit, Los Angeles, etc., and making Americans rich. This fucking Iran shit and fucking Israel shit isn't doing jack shit for making Americans get money. All it's doing is making our national debt bigger, like I said earlier. Marky Mark said, yeah, Jeffrey, what are you about? When Ricky said, if you believe in God, you would protect Israel. Well, I think we need to give up protecting the Holy Land, and we need to protect the Holy Land that we live in here in America, or maybe you don't live here, but where the people who voted for Trump to make Americans richer again and not make our national debt bigger by sending giant warships over to Israel. We need to be focused on getting those warships back home and leave some there. Maybe give them a little bit more of an Iron Dome to protect themselves. Maybe leave 1 or 2 warships there in case they got to use that because the Iron Dome gets overwhelmed. And we don't need to go on the offensive and go sending B-52s into Iran. You know how much money it costs to put a B-52 in the air? It costs millions of dollars to put a B-52 in the air. Wait, oh shit. Oops, hold on. Damn it! Hold on, I can get back on the video. 1 second. Hang on, we're gonna get right back on that video. So this is nuclear weapons in Iran. This is the guy saying if he really had them. We're gonna let him finish talking. We pretty much got through all the comments. More comments. If you believe in God, alright. You're a fool. E. Espen says you're a fool. Okay. G. Hold on.
Oh, that does read.
Here, we're gonna let this guy explain in a minute. Let me finish reading the comments. Flash light speed. Alright. G. Vin he says that. Jeffrey. Maybe he knows something you don't. Yeah, that's one thing I said too. Like maybe once you become president, like you know things that like you only know if you're the CIA, so maybe like Trump knows something that nobody else knows except the CIA and Trump, and maybe that's why he's got this kick on Israel. I mean, because Trump's always been America first, making Americans richer, but there's something about Israel. It's weird. I don't get it. But continuing on, and it's weird too, because Jeffrey Epstein, did you guys know Jeffrey Epstein was heavy connected to Israel? Jeffrey Epstein got a lot of his kids from Israel. Did you know that too? Anyways, continuing on. I don't know why I brought up Epstein, but just bringing that out there. And then, here, we're going to continue. We got one last comment, and then we're going to continue. Oh, cool. What's up from Australia? Rob Scary. Sorry if you pronounced your name wrong. Rob Scary. S-K-E-R-R-Y. Sorry, I'm just going to call you Rob. Rob. What's up from Israel? Like, subscribe, share, hit thumbs up. We're going to play this guy who's talking about basically what I've been saying. I really don't think they got what they need to make the nuclear bombs in Iran. If anything, what America needs to be more worried about, we need to be worried about here, is all them people that Joe Biden let in and the sleeper cells that could currently be in America that are actually Iranian like fucking dirty deeds done dirt cheap type people ain't gonna come here and do terror in America. That's what we need to freaking be worried about, not fucking making sure we're gonna go bomb a mountain with jack shit in it. And then to the last comment, holy battle scars. Motorcade Ministry. This is God's will. When you get threatened, you go to take care if it to make us safe. Learn something. Okay, alright, let's let this guy explain it.
Well, did you crack the atom? But you haven't demonstrated the ability to actually deliver that explosion where you want it. See, the thing is, this device that can do this is going to be fairly large, very heavy, and difficult to hurl at someone. So if you've demonstrated that you can capture the power of the atom but not deliver it, that is the time when anyone who doesn't like you is going to hit you very, 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 very hard to prevent you from getting a deliverable weapon. And Iran knows this. Iran knows that if they manage to demonstrate that they can crack the atom but not deliver it, then everyone will be after them. So
yeah, so even if they get to be able to, if they can crack the atom but they can't deliver the atom, it's not going to do them any good.
The question is whether they can do it or not. I would say they can't because they haven't. And even if they did, all that would do is open up a whole Pandora's box of security problems for them. So, am I concerned about Iran for any number of reasons? Sure. This doesn't make my list. Now, that does raise the question of a broader question of who might want a nuke. As we've seen over the last 80 years, the countries that develop a nuclear arsenal are the ones who don't think that they can win a conventional conflict. So Israel has...
Yeah, I'm trying to fix the zoom, sorry.
...overwhelmed by the Arabs. India has nukes because it was concerned about a war with Pakistan and vice versa. China has nukes because they're concerned about Japan and the United States and so on and so on. And so the countries that the United States has traditionally been concerned about are the ones who might find themselves in a conventional war with the United States. Iran obviously falls into that category. But if you're looking forward, it's probably going to be a different list of countries that are on the proliferation list. Because if the United States backs away from some of its security commitments, that changes. During the Cold War instead, the United States has a series of alliances that basically underwrite the security of any number of countries. And some American nationalists see that as a problem, see these countries as freeloaders. But should the United States no longer provide the nuclear umbrella, a lot of these countries are going to feel that they have to take care of themselves. And for many of them who don't think they can win a conventional fight against a superior conventional force, that means nukes.
That is a much better view.
So during the Cold War, China had nukes to fend us off, but the Koreans, the Taiwanese, the Japanese felt they didn't need one. You remove the United States from that strategic competition, and all of a sudden they do. And all three of those countries, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, have civilian nuclear programs and could easily build a bomb in a matter of days or weeks. In the Middle Eastern theater, it's not so much Iran that I worry about as, say, Saudi Arabia, who may not have the technical expertise to build a bomb, but they certainly have the cash to buy one. And in the European theater, if the Americans, for whatever reason, are AWOL, and you're dealing with the Russians, you have a whole list of countries that are going to want nukes. Kazakhstan, Finland, Sweden, Germany, and above all else, Poland. So for people who are arguing that nuclear proliferation is an issue, I say, yeah, it is. But the suspects are not the usual ones.
Okay, that was interesting. Honestly, I agree with that guy. I really don't think, even if they did manage to make the atom crack, even if they crack the atom, they're still not going to be able to deliver it. At least not to harm any of us here in America.
And the color blue. Let's show how this is extracted through super simplified animation. The centrifuge consists of a high-grade tube with a spinning motor at the bottom and a feeding tube at the top. Uranium is fed into the centrifuge as a gas called uranium hexafluoride. As the motor spins at high speed, the heavier uranium-238 is separated from the lighter uranium-235 using centrifugal force. The uranium-235 floats to the top and is collected at this section of the centrifuge, while the heavier uranium-238 in the color green falls to the bottom of this centrifuge and the enrichment process is complete. Let's take a look at how Israel uses an air force to strike nuclear targets. Iran's primary enrichment site and missile production complexes.
Damn, Israel and Iran are that far from each other?
Involved complex planning, including calculations for air refueling and coordinating attack aircraft to pass through Jordan, Syria,
I thought Israel
and Iraq.
was closer to Iran.
They also neutralized potential air defense threats in Syria and Iraq to ensure a safe return in case they were targeted. Israel's strategy was to attack Iran in 3 waves. The first wave targeted surface air-to-air sites, radar installations, and Iran's air defense headquarters in Tehran, Elam, and Quzes.
Why is Iran even fucking with Israel like that when they're so far from each other? This shit's all lies.
Targeted military manufacturing industries. To avoid Iranian air defenses, they used the ROX missiles, which allowed them to strike from positions closer to enemy targets without requiring jets to penetrate deep into Iranian territory. Surprisingly, the Iranian Bavar 373 air defense system performed better than expected. We'll also look into how this air defense missile works and the strength of the Iranian Air Force, all in the video ahead. Let's just first look at Israel fighter jets used in the operations. The tip of the spears are the 5th generation F-35 fighter jets, F-16 air defense jets, and F-15 ground attack jets, which covered approximately 1,600 kilometers, translating to around 1,000 miles.
I thought, I didn't even know they were that far apart from each other. I thought they were right next to each other. Go read the comments coming in a minute, we'll pause it again. But I didn't even know Iran and Israel were that far from each other. They got all that land that's surrounding them. Why the hell are those two oh, I know why those two countries are fucking with each other. Because they both have, because like I said earlier, a few minutes ago, Iran does the dirty deeds for all the terrorist countries, and Israel does the dirty deeds that America doesn't want to do for America.
While the weapons of choice were the Blue Arrow long-range supersonic missile and the ROX next-generation extended standoff air-to-surface missile. To cover such distances, air refueling tankers were used between flights. This measure was taken in case they needed to engage in a dogfight with Iranian fighter jets, and also while returning from their mission. ROX is Israel's next-generation extended standoff air-to-surface ballistics missile. Israel's strike also took out General Hossein Salami, one of the country's most powerful and influential military commanders. It also allows the weapon to hit targets that have moved from their original positions. But in an area of high-threat situation, these bombs typically use a GPS-enabled inertial guidance system to guide them to the general target area, before switching to an imaging infrared seeker for the terminal stage of flight, destroying the targets with deep penetration or blast fragmentation as required.
Can you answer these people for me? Shivity's gonna
Surprisingly,
answer.
the Bavar 373 and S-300 missiles successfully intercepted Israeli drones and some missiles. Let's take a quick look at the Bavar 373. This system uses Sayed-4 missiles, which are housed in 2 rectangular launch canisters. It features a phased array radar system for tracking both aerodynamic targets and ballistic missiles over medium to long ranges. One of the radars used in the Bavar 373 is the Mirage 4, a phased array radar with a range of 450 kilometers, which Iran claims this system can simultaneously track up to 200 targets. The Israeli attack can be divided into 3 distinct phases, first, second, and third wave, each targeting critical components of Iran's military infrastructure. Speaking of targets, since I've been traveling to the UK and Ireland recently, we've had to rely on airport Wi-Fi, which can be dangerously insecure. Using Surfshark VPN, it not only encrypts our data, but also changes our IP address, allowing us to appear virtually anywhere.
Oh, no. It's not fair to me for this advertisement. And neither is the VPN.
Enabling Iran's air defense systems. Tehran, Elam, and Quzes that are some of the region-verified attacks also confirmed by Iran that were hit or partially damaged. Key targets include surface-to-air missile or SAM sites and radar installations, crucial for early detection and defense against aerial assaults. Iran's air defense headquarters confirmed the attacks happened, which aimed to cripple the nation's ability to track and respond to future incoming threats. While the second wave targets Iran's missile capabilities, specifically focusing on neutralizing both ballistic and hypersonic missile systems. At least 3 missile bases were attacked in a second round or second wave of Israeli strike. IDF drones also targeted a secretive Parchin military base in the outskirts of Tehran, and finally one drone made it through the Iranian air defense and hit the base while others were shot down. These strikes are designed to prevent Iran from launching retaliatory missile strikes. The third and final wave focuses on destroying key military barracks and manufacturing facilities essential to Iran's missile production and military logistics. Targets include the Qadiri barracks and Hassan Khan Castle, a missile manufacturing and preparation center. The Sepah Air Force Logistics Center and Imam Ali barracks are allegedly included in this phase to disrupt logistical support and command structures. Israel were trying to target these missiles bases like the Fatah-1 and Fatah-2 missiles. It was used for the first time and is one of Iran's advanced missile systems. What sets it apart from other ballistic missiles is its ability to accelerate outside the Earth's atmosphere, while its aerodynamic control surfaces enable steering to evade the famous Aero missile defense system made by Israel. Israel was also looking to strike these ground-launched ballistic missiles that targeted the IDF bases. Israel also wants to dismantle. The Shahab-3 is the foundation for all of Iran's medium-range ballistic missiles and uses liquid propellant. Let's break this down into several parts. To fight against the F-16 and F-35 jets, the Iranian have the tip of the spear. It consists of American-made aircraft, around 64 numbers of F-4 Phantoms that Iran purchased during the Shah's regime. The F-4 Phantom is Iran's primary attack aircraft and is considered the backbone of the Iranian Air Force. In addition, Iran possesses around 40 numbers of F-14 Tomcats, also American-made, which still have the capability to pose a threat to the F-35. Iran also acquired approximately 30 MiG-29 multi-role fighter jets from Russia, interestingly designed to counter the F-16. The second part of the air defense is the $800 million S-300 air defense system, which is capable of intercepting targets at a range of 120 kilometers that translates to about 75 miles. When launched on a ballistic trajectory, it can reach distances of up to 400 kilometers, that is around 250 miles. But they might have intercepted low-flying cruise missiles, otherwise it could have been a much larger destruction if not for these air defense systems. We also make original engineering content, so please subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos.
Sweetie Belle, maybe we should run through the steps another few times before you try it on your own. Nope, ready to give it a shot. Okay then.
How the fuck do I get the manual point?
For 54 years, since the early 1970s, the Assad family continually dominated Syria's government. The most serious challenge
how
to the family's
Israel
long rule in
checkmated
the country
Iran. Let's hear
erupted in
this.
2011.
This sounds
Protests
interesting.
evolved into revolution, which evolved into full-scale civil war. Then, after nearly a decade of brutal fighting throughout the country that claimed the lives of around 600,000 people and forced more than 6 million others to flee the country as refugees.
Alright, here, let me read the comments real quick before we get into the next video. Alright, picking up where we left off on the comments, because Shivity just said he agreed with me. Okay, so, Rob Scary said, S-K-E-R-R-Y. Oi, spot on, brother. I'm assuming you were saying something about America first with the spot on. Stephen Tomlinson. I love Trump. I love Trump too. I do not agree with what he's doing with Israel. Joshua, Trump is the GOAT. I think Trump is the best president we've ever had, and he's like George Washington. I don't know, I kind of feel like with this whole Israel thing, he's trying to pull like a George Bush move, where like, basically, when you think of George Bush, what's the first thing you all think of? I think of 9/11, Afghanistan war starting, and what was that, the Iraq war starting. When I think of George Bush, those are the three things I think of. Trump, you don't want to be remembered as the president that had to go fucking bomb Iran. I mean, there's a lot of people that are not agreeing with this whole Israel shit, Trump. You need to get on that and focus on the Make America Great, make Americans richer, bring down our price of gas, make homes more affordable, make the cost of living more affordable, try to bring down taxes, etc. Trump, that's what you need to be focused on, not this stupid Iran shit, bro. But Trump's still my homie.
But I just do not agree with you one bit with what you're doing right now, Trump, on this one issue. And there's a couple other issues I don't agree with either, but this issue I strongly disagree with. Joshua, Trump is the GOAT. Stephen, okay, read that. Marky Mark, still skill issue. Reach Canoe, sorry, I'm bad at pronouncing names, sorry. You need more info, and it sounds like you're misinformed. Okay, well, R-E-A-C-H, Reach New, can you please inform us in your comments? Comment and inform us, please. Marky Mark, love you, Mommy. Mommy, who's... You said love you, M-A-N-E. Money? Who's that? Who's Money? Can you explain? S3 Designs US. Reach Ken W. Who's Ken? Was Ken W up there? I don't see no Ken W in the comments. Who's Ken W? Can you tell me who Ken W is? Alright, back to that. I was seeing if he was in the comments. I don't know who Ken W is, but can you tell me S3 Design US? Marky Mark. It's all about the love, guys. Marky Mark. Please keep the comments respectful. Thank you, Marky Mark. My kid. Oh wait, we already read all this shit. We were further down. Ah, here's where we left off. I think. Wait. Okay, here's where we left off. Alright, so picking up where we left off. Shivity Smolsky. Much better view, Johnny. I appreciate that. Then 4DAM said, hey man, 4DAM. Wow, 146 is crazy. Yeah, I know. First time. 4DAM. Hey, 4DAM, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, okay? Make sure you hit the thumbs up and subscribe. I got a lot of other great videos, especially with the immigrants. Okay, 4D... Sorry, my wife was waking up. 4DAM. Iran, are we going to win anyways? It's a waste of time. Then Jeffrey said, Jeffrey TJ, we have to unite against billionaires and stop them letting them divide us because they're only looking out for themselves. They don't have to improve anything when they just keep blaming. No, Trump's not blaming anyone, but I get what you're saying. David Bollock, because they're... Yeah, I'm just going to let this play.
The war entered into a tenuous ceasefire in 2020 that largely froze the front lines where they stood at the time, which left the Assad regime in control over most of the country's major cities and population centers.
And kicks supplies
time,
and supplies
most of the
them
world
with
began
the
moving on
equipment.
from
You are
conflict in
correct.
Syria, and after years had passed with the ceasefire generally holding steady, many began presuming that Assad, along with his Russian and Iranian supporters, had effectively won the war, or that Syria had become a frozen conflict. But then, 4 years into the ceasefire generally holding steady, it was suddenly shattered by a renewed rebel offensive against the government that began at the end of November 2024. And at the complete shock
On
of
everything
just about
else, he's
everybody,
America
this
first,
renewed rebel offensive exposed the Assad regime in the country as an empty house of cards. And the Assad family's 54-year-long
Charlotte, that's how he's America first with everything else he's doing, except this Iran bullshit.
Since then, this sudden and unexpected collapse of such a long-lasting regime in such a strategically significant country has generated
no
one
more
of the 21st century's
misadventures of
most
conquest
substantial
for Israel or
geopolitical
anyone else.
earthquakes.
Oh, check out my good ventures I have. I got a lot of good videos in my live category. When I'm done, check out my other videos in the live category, the regular uploads, and shorts. I got a lot of other great videos in there. So when this live is over, check out the other videos on my channel. I'm sure you'll find a lot more interesting stuff. And if you scroll back to like a year or two ago, you'll see a lot about the immigrants. I snuck into an immigration shelter multiple times, and then they had to remove a white homeless male from the immigration shelter. That's a good video. It was about a year and a half ago in the live category. You gotta scroll back to, or in the regular uploads category. I forgot for videos.
So to understand what the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria means for the future, and how it completely screws over both Iran and Russia, let's start with how it screws over Iran first, and then move on to how it screws over Russia next. First of all, the Assad regime's rule in Syria represented a linchpin in Iran's overall strategy for confronting their arch enemy, the Israelis. Iran's revolutionary government has always been opposed to the existence of Israel and has been locked in a shadow war across the Middle East with Tel Aviv for decades. The Assads in Syria, though lacking Iran's particular ideology of Islamist revolutionary fervor, shared the exact same enemies as revolutionary Iran had: Israel, the United States, and Saddam Hussein's Iraq. This led to Syria under Assad family rule quickly aligning itself to the young Islamic Republic as a mutual bulwark against their shared enemies. Syria became the first Arab state to recognize Iran's new revolutionary government after 1979, and it was the only Middle Eastern state to openly support Iran during its brutal 8-year war against Saddam's Iraq throughout the 1980s. In the aftermath of that war, Syria and Iran remained mutually aligned against their shared enemy, Israel. And so, the Assads in Syria granted the Iranians open access to their country's territory in order to fly in arms, supplies, and advisors who were then able to travel into neighboring Lebanon, where they trained up and built an organization out of Lebanon's Shia Muslim community that eventually became known as Hezbollah. Syria's deep friendship with Iran and its space on the board made it an invaluable asset to Iran's strategy in confronting Israel, effectively serving as Iran's most important land bridge towards Iran's most important proxy force, Hezbollah in Lebanon. After the collapse of Saddam's anti-Iran and anti-Syria government in Iraq after 2003,
What Shivity said, 4D AM.
Hezbollah was even further opened up
I
by land
approve.
and air
Shivity's got a channel
enabling
too.
Iranian
Subscribe to
troops escorted
Shivity
by
when we're
friendly
done
Shia
with this
paramilitaries
live.
in Iraq to travel continually through Iraqi territory and then friendly Syrian territory directly to Hezbollah in Lebanon. This was how,
This is
over
pretty
a span of years across the late
interesting. Everyone
2000s
agree?
and the 2010s, Iran was able to arm and build up Hezbollah directly on Israel's northern border into a truly formidable fighting force. With an estimated 50,000 fighters and around 150,000 missiles and rockets by 2023, which earned Hezbollah the recognition of being the most heavily armed non-state actor in the entire world, and Iran's most valuable foreign asset. Hezbollah's massive fighting force and its arsenal of missiles and rockets effectively became Iran's ultimate insurance policy against the risk of a direct Israeli or American air campaign against their own nuclear and military sites or government infrastructure in Iran. If the Americans and the Israelis ever decided to bomb Iran, Iran could always just authorize Hezbollah to rain down their hellfire upon Israel from Lebanon, thus ensuring some form of mutually assured destruction and deterrence against Israel or the United States from ever doing so. It was Iran's strategy
crazy
to
how
put
far
pressure on
apart these
Israel and
two
to keep
countries
any
are.
fighting between them far away from Iran's own borders. And thus, Syria's territory was the absolute linchpin in this entire strategy, because without it, Iran would have no way to continue resupplying and supporting Hezbollah in Lebanon. This is why, when the civil war erupted in Syria and the Assad government looked like it might collapse, Iran and Hezbollah both intervened directly on Assad's behalf against the rebels, with thousands of foot soldiers and fighters in order to keep their supply route open against Israel. So now, after the Assad regime's sudden collapse at the end of 2024, Iran has also probably lost that invaluable land bridge across Syrian territory that they've been able to reliably use to support Hezbollah in Lebanon with for decades, ever since Hezbollah's very founding. To make matters even worse, Hezbollah was also very badly bloodied by the Israelis during their war between September and November of 2024, right before the Assad regime collapsed. Israel had managed to catastrophically infiltrate Hezbollah as an organization, and through a series of major surprise attacks, they were able to destroy the organization's communications and eliminated virtually all of Hezbollah's top leadership, including Hezbollah's top leader himself, Hassan Nasrallah. Thousands of Hezbollah's rank-and-file fighters were either killed or incapacitated by the Israeli attacks. And by November of 2024, with Hezbollah effectively paralyzed and incapable of responding effectively, the IDF claimed that the relentless aerial campaign against Hezbollah had successfully destroyed more than 80% of the organization's once feared missile and rocket arsenal. Indeed, Hezbollah's catastrophic losses inflicted by the Israelis led directly to the Syrian rebels calculating that they would be too weak to intervene in Syria to save Assad once again, which contributed to their ultimate victory in overthrowing Assad so rapidly without Hezbollah's support. So now, with Hezbollah a compromised and spent force with as much as 80% of their Iranian-supplied missile and rocket arsenal destroyed, and with the Assad regime in Syria toppled, Iran will find it incredibly difficult, if not even impossible, to rebuild Hezbollah back into even a fraction of the menace it used to appear to the Israelis prior to 2024. And with that, Iran's ultimate insurance policy against an Israeli and American attack has been completely undone. The loss of Assad in Syria also means that Iran has lost the only UN member state that was truly aligned to it in the Middle East. And with Hezbollah now crippled and firmly isolated from Iran, and with Hamas being increasingly destroyed in Gaza, Iran's entire strategy of putting pressure on Israel's borders and keeping the fight away from their own borders that they spent decades carefully putting into place was completely undone in only a matter of days. And then, to make matters still even worse for Iran and Hezbollah, the Israelis have taken steps since the fall of the Assad regime to increase their momentum and advantages even further. On the 8th of December, the very same day that the Assad regime was actively collapsing and Assad himself fled Syria to Russia, the IDF's ground forces seized on the opportunity and advanced from their positions in the Golan Heights to occupy the Purple Line. The UN established buffer zone between the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights taken from Syria in 1967 and the rest of Syria that was established after the Yom Kippur War in 1974. Since the Syrian army withdrew from their side of the Purple Line as the Assad government was actively collapsing, the Israelis were able to seize control over it and some surrounding areas without even having to fire a shot. In total, the Israelis seized control over an area in Syria about 2/3 the size of the Gaza Strip. And though it will be universally rejected by the new Syrian government and by international law, and despite Israel insisting that the new occupation is only temporary, Israel will be very unlikely to ever give it up voluntarily because of how immensely strategically important it is for them. The most important part of the Purple Line that the Israelis took over in the advance was the Syrian side of the summit of Mount Hermon. At an elevation of 2,814 meters above sea level, it's the highest point anywhere in Syria and the highest geographical point in the region for 100 kilometers. By taking control of the mountain summit, Israel has opened up the ability to position their artillery there to be within striking range of the Syrian capital, Damascus, only about 40 kilometers away. Even more importantly, in the past, the towering height of Mount Hermon outside of Israel's control also created a significant blind spot in Israel's northern early warning radar defenses. Based on the summit of Mount Meron, at just 1,204 meters above sea level, the highest elevated point anywhere within Israel's internationally recognized borders, these radar systems struggle to see anything beyond the towering height of Mount Hermon about 60 kilometers away, which stands over 1,600 meters higher up in elevation than Mount Meron does. As a result, low-flying drones and other aircraft from Hezbollah or Iran could take advantage of this blind spot to infiltrate into Israel's northern airspace undetected. Now, the cover provided by Mount Hermon enabled Hezbollah and Iran to establish their primary smuggling routes from Syria to the north of the mountain, and which also connected Hezbollah's two zones of control in southern Lebanon and the northeastern Bekaa Valley with each other. But now with Israel's takeover at Mount Hermon's summit, all of these capabilities that Hezbollah and Iran have enjoyed ever since Hezbollah's founding have been effectively eliminated. In time, Israel will establish early warning radar, observation, and air defense systems on the mountain's summit that will enable the Israelis to see deep into both Syria and Hezbollah's strongholds in Lebanon like they've never been able to do before. Sensors placed at the top of the mountain will be able to intercept local communications. All of Hezbollah's traditional smuggling routes from Syria will be openly within the IDF's lines of sight, while low-flying drones and missiles fired into northern Israel will no longer be capable of exploiting the mountain as a blind spot. All of this means that even if Syria somehow remained friendly to Iran and Hezbollah, which is extremely unlikely, Hezbollah's ability to receive resupplies and arms from Iran has still been severely compromised just by Israel's seizure of Mount Hermon. Moreover, Israel also took further steps after the seizure of Mount Hermon to expose Iran itself to a major direct attack, the likes of which it has never been before in its entire history. Over the following 8 days after the Assad regime collapsed in Syria, as the country was incapable of responding, the Israeli Air Force carried out an enormous bombing campaign all across the country that saw Israeli warplanes striking targets in Syria around 600 times. It's since been described as the largest aerial operation ever carried out in the history of the Israeli Air Force, and it relentlessly targeted the Assad regime's arms depots, weapons storage sites, air bases, naval assets, anti-air batteries, radar installations, and weapons production sites. Through all of these attacks, the Israeli Air Force claims to have completely destroyed the entire Syrian Navy, and to have blown up roughly 80% of Syria's strategic heavy weapons. More importantly, the Israelis also claim to have tripled all of the radar systems in Syria and to have destroyed around 90% of Syria's surface-to-air missiles and their accompanying launch systems. The Israelis claim that this entire operation was done in order to prevent the Syrian army's assets from coming into the hands of an unpredictable new government in Syria that might or might not turn out to be hostile to Israel. But the real reason that the Israelis appear to have done all of that is to open up the door to a major direct attack on Iran itself. Some officials of the Israeli military have characterized this operation as having turned the whole of Syria into a so-called sterile defense zone. With practically all of the Syrian army's radar, early warning, and anti-air systems destroyed by the operation, the Israelis have essentially opened up the whole of Syrian airspace to their own unrestricted use for whatever operation they want to pursue there. Before this, the Israeli Air Force was highly constrained in the types of operations that it could actually conduct directly against Iran because of Syria and its close ties with Iran. Israel has already acquired a total of 39 ultra-modern F-35 stealth fighter jets from the United States, and they've placed orders for another 36 more of them, which notably makes them the only country in the Middle East that actually operates the F-35. Now, the F-35 stealth capabilities were advanced enough that they could have flown across Syrian airspace undetected by Syria's older and largely Soviet-era air defenses. But the problem is that they only have an operational range of around 1,200 nautical miles for combat missions. The northernmost airbase in Israel that fighter jets can actually operate out of is Ramat David Air Base here, and it's about 630 nautical miles away from Iran's furthest west border as the crow flies, which means that Israel's incredibly expensive F-35s couldn't fly through Syria's air defenses and attack targets in Iran, and also have enough fuel left over to return back home again. In order to give the F-35s the range they actually needed, they would need to be accompanied by aerial refueling tanker aircraft. Now, the Israeli Air Force possesses several of these kinds of aircraft from the United States. But the problem is that unlike the F-35s, the tankers are big, slow, and not stealthy at all, which basically makes them sitting ducks to air defenses and surface-to-air missiles, even to the more outdated Cold War air systems that Syria had. This meant that for basically all of modern history, Syria's dense concentration of air defenses eliminated the Israeli Air Force's ability to ever sustain a long-range direct attack on Iran, while its radar systems also provided the Iranians with an early warning system to alert them to any incoming Israeli aerial attack as well. Now, however, with the Assad regime gone and with all of Syria's radar and air defenses destroyed and sterilized, Israel has essentially kicked down the gate that was defending Iran against a massive Israeli air assault for decades. And with their neutralization of Hezbollah, Israel has also eliminated Iran's biggest deterrence policy that they had against a massive Israeli aerial assault as well. Iran now has no credible deterrence to threaten Israel with to discourage them from launching a direct attack. And they have no capability to prevent the Israeli Air Force from flying directly to their own borders through Syria and Iraq. It's been estimated by some of the Syrian rebels that it'll take decades to recover Syria's lost military capabilities that Israel destroyed during their airstrikes. Iran itself has very capable air defenses and detection systems on their own territory, but Israel now has the ability to use Syria as an aerial launching pad towards them. A fleet of Israeli fighters and tankers could use this opportunity to fly across Syrian airspace to the northeast of the country, where the tankers could then linger in safety while the fighters continue on into Iran to bomb sensitive military and nuclear sites and even centers of the Iranian government. Then, the fighters could return back to northeastern Syria, load up on fuel with the lingering tankers, and then they could all return safely back to their bases in Israel again. All of this could even give the Israelis the option of conducting a major aerial raid against the Iranian capital itself, Tehran, where they could seek to kill the country's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, along with other senior members of the regime. As shown by Israel's aerial bombing campaign against Hezbollah in the Lebanese capital Beirut in 2024, Tel Aviv has shown that they are both capable
Damn right.
and willing
America
to
first,
eliminate
screw
senior
Iran,
leadership
screw
even in
Israel,
foreign
America
capitals.
first.
And now that they've just acquired the capability to do that against Iran too, even without the external support of the United States, they might decide that the window of opportunity they've acquired will just be too good a one to give up. In October of 2024, the Israeli Air Force did carry out a major attack against Iran, but the Biden administration in the United States pressured the Israelis into avoiding any attacks against Iran's valuable nuclear or oil facilities. With the new Trump...
That's because Joe Biden is a confused old man.
administration and the White House next, however, these restrictions from America will likely not bind Israel in the near future. Trump has repeatedly expressed his support to giving the Israelis a freer hand in fighting Iran and its proxies in the Middle East. And unlike Biden, Trump is much more likely to approve of a major Israeli airstrike against Iran now that they have the opportunity to do so. And the Israelis are probably now just waiting for the green light to do so. With Trump coming back into office in Washington and his promise to return the policy of maximum pressure on Iran again, with Assad's collapse in Syria, Hezbollah's crippling in Lebanon, and Hamas's looming destruction in Gaza, Iran has never found itself more isolated and exposed to its enemies since Saddam's Iraqi invasion in 1980, more than 40 years ago. And their entire strategy of confronting Israel that they've carefully pursued for decades now has just been completely undermined. Alright, now let's move on to the equally catastrophic consequences for Russia that have resulted from the collapse of Assad in Syria, too. Russia and the Assad dynasty in Syria had a very long and very mutually beneficial relationship. After Bashar al-Assad's father, Hafez al-Assad, first rose to power in Syria in 1971, he almost immediately agreed to lease the port of Tartus on the Syrian coast to the Soviet Navy. Tartus then became an extremely strategically important asset to the Soviets, as it was the only Soviet naval base located anywhere on the Mediterranean Sea. It enabled the Soviet Navy to use Tartus as a resupply and replenishment base to support their operations in the Mediterranean, without them having to pass through the NATO-controlled Turkish Straits back to their own domestic ports on the Black Sea. Without Tartus, the Soviet Navy would not have been able to operate anywhere in the Mediterranean effectively, and thus they wouldn't have been able to credibly threaten NATO's southern flank from the Mediterranean. While the base also served as a sort of Soviet counterweight to America's primary Mediterranean naval base in Naples, Italy. The Soviets also rewarded the Assads in Syria for granting them the Tartus naval base lease by lavishing them with military and diplomatic support. Between 1950 and 1991, a whopping 94% of all of Syria's arms imports came exclusively from the Soviet Union, including hundreds of fighter aircraft and artillery pieces, thousands of tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, and notably, more than 13,000 surface-to-air missiles and 7,500 anti-tank missiles. Thousands of Soviet advisors were deployed to Syria to assist with the country's war against Israel during the Yom Kippur War in 1973, while Syria was the sole Arab state not to condemn the Soviet Union over its invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. The relations ran deep, and they continued to remain close after the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1990s. Russia remained the primary arms supplier of Syria, while Syria continued to lease the port of Tartus to the Russian Black Sea Fleet. In 2005, Syria agreed to allow the Russians to expand their naval facilities in Tartus in exchange for Russia writing off more than 70% of Syria's $13 billion debt that was left over from the Soviet era. As Russia's relationship with the West began to deteriorate after their invasion of Georgia in 2008, Bashar al-Assad reportedly even allowed the Russians to transform Tartus into a permanent naval base and to station nuclear-armed submarines at the base. Thereafter, Tartus likely became a critically important component to Russia's overall conventional and nuclear deterrence strategies, since it certainly enabled Russian warships armed with long-range missiles to operate in the Mediterranean within striking distance of NATO targets in southern Europe, and it likely enabled their nuclear-armed submarines to operate freely within the Mediterranean as well, and all without them having to pass through the still NATO-controlled Turkish Straits back towards their home ports on the Black Sea to replenish and resupply. After the civil war in Syria erupted against Bashar al-Assad's rule of the country in 2011, Russia diplomatically supported his regime by using its position as a permanent member on the UN Security Council to veto multiple resolutions by Western and Arab countries that called for sanctions or military intervention in Syria, while Russia dramatically stepped up the arms deliveries it made to Assad through their continued lease over the port at Tartus. Then, in 2015, as it appeared that the Assad regime was on the brink of imminent collapse in Syria with dramatic rebel advancements, Russia initiated a massive, full-scale military intervention in Syria in order to save Assad and to save their continued access to the port at Tartus. Around 20,000 Russian military personnel were deployed to Syria, while the Russian Navy and Air Force spent years relentlessly bombarding rebels and civilians across the country that killed thousands of people. During the Russian intervention, the Assad regime allowed the Russians to construct a new major air base for their aerial operations in the country here at Hmeimim within Syria's Latakia province, which became the nerve center for Russia's aerial operations throughout Syria and the Middle East. By 2017, the Russian military intervention had largely stabilized Assad's position in Syria, and in return, Assad led Syria to signing an agreement with the Russians that granted them a 49-year-long lease to both the naval base at Tartus and the new air base at Hamadan, theoretically lasting up until the year 2066. In just about all but name, the agreement also made both bases effectively sovereign pockets of Russian territory within Syria. Russia was granted sole sovereign jurisdiction over both of the bases, while Russian personnel and materiel at the bases were granted full legal immunity from Syrian jurisdiction. In the aftermath, both of these bases they carved out in Syria became enormously critical assets to Russia's geopolitical objectives. They enabled Russian naval and air power to be projected beyond the Black Sea into the Eastern Mediterranean and into the Middle East. And they most critically enabled Russia to expand their military operations into other theaters far away from Russia's own borders. They enabled Russia to basically be able to leapfrog their military support from the Black Sea to Syria and then to the forces of Field Marshal Khalifa Haftar and the Libyan National Army during the Libyan Civil War, while they also enabled Russia's expeditionary adventures using the Wagner Group and later the Africa Corps in countries like Sudan, the Central African Republic, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. Hamadan and Tartus in Syria became the critical bases in the center between Russia itself and Russia's military operations in Africa, which served multiple important objectives. By supporting Khalifa Haftar's forces in Libya, Russia hopes to disrupt Libya's normally large oil supply to Europe as much as possible, and to build up military bases located in Africa itself to project power even deeper south into the continent. By supporting the junta-led governments in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, Russia hopes to disrupt Niger's large uranium supply to the nuclear reactors in France, and to disrupt France's influence in their former colonies in Africa as much as possible. A highly successful strategy that has contributed to the French being forced to withdraw their military presences from Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, and Senegal, all just since 2022 after the invasion of Ukraine. In many of these cases, especially in the Sahel states and in Sudan, Russian mercenaries fight on behalf of government forces and stabilize their regimes, and are then granted valuable contracts on mining operations and resources like gold and diamonds.
Hurry in a wreck. Moment as you're back, with nothing up front.
I got all of this for $30. It's an app called Whatnot. Download it right now. You just search what you're looking for, and there's people who are live selling these things, and you are bidding. So let's see what I got. Look at the bottom of this. Initially $75, and I ended up getting this for $4. When I think this was for people, $94. Got this for $4. $2. So cute. $2. This is all wrinkled up, but I got it for $1. Oh, I got this one for $7. Oh my god, it's heavy. Cute. You don't have to go to the estates, stores, nothing. If you are a thrift shopper, this app is for you.
You have heart in you. Critics everywhere are raving about The Life of Chuck. It's one of the most profoundly beautiful films ever. And a life-affirming masterpiece. It's a wonderful life for today. In this moment, I am wonderful. The Life of Chuck.
And are then granted valuable contracts on mining operations and resources like gold and diamonds. The business model, if you can even call it that Russia and the Wagner Group pioneered and established in Africa is basically that Russia flies in mercenaries to stabilize unpopular or isolated African governments. And then they fly out valuable minerals like gold and diamonds back to Russia that are hard to track and which enable Russia to evade the sanctions that have been imposed on them by the West after the invasion of Ukraine. And it's the Russian bases in Syria that they secured after 2017 that made this entire strategy possible, especially the major air base at Hamadan that enables heavy Russian cargo aircraft the ability to use it as a refueling and logistical center between Russia itself and all of their operations in Libya and the rest of Africa. These were the reasons why Russia so heavily supported Assad's government in Syria and intervened so heavily against the rebels in the country, and why Russia's interests in Syria perfectly aligned with Iran and Hezbollah's interests in Syria as well, and why they all cooperated together there, which formed the foundation for the modern close relationship between Russia and Iran that's been evolving in other theaters too, like in Ukraine. But now with the collapse of Assad's government in Syria, Russia's enormous investment in up in the country now seems like it might all go up in smoke. and Russia's continued access to Tartus and Hmeimim is more uncertain than it has ever been before. If the new government in Syria revokes Russia's leases and access to the bases, it'll be catastrophic for Russia's current strategy. Without the Tartus naval base, the Russian Navy will lose the ability to freely operate anywhere in the Mediterranean Sea, especially since due to the ongoing war raging in Ukraine, Turkey has invoked the terms of the 1936 Montreux Convention, which prevents Russia from being able to move any of its warships through the Turkish Straits between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, or vice versa. So long as the war in Ukraine continues, Russia's ports in the Black Sea are completely inaccessible to the Russian Navy from the Mediterranean. And if they lose access to the Tartus naval base, they'll also lose their only port on the Mediterranean, too, which will basically eliminate Russia's ability to operate submarines or warships anywhere in the Mediterranean for long periods of time, without any nearby ports to use for resupply or replenishment, which will cripple Russia's ability to credibly threaten NATO with warships and with nuclear-armed submarines in the Mediterranean. And the loss of the Hmeimim air base means that Russia's ability to continue supporting their expeditionary operations across Africa will be severely crippled, if not outright eliminated altogether, with multiple cascading consequences. In the event that they for sure do lose access to their Syrian bases, the Russians in the short term will likely attempt and shift over as much of their military assets as possible from Syria to Libya. Indeed, even before the Assad regime collapsed in Syria, Russia was busy dramatically expanding its military footprint in Libya for months throughout 2024. Khalifa Haftar, the warlord who currently dominates eastern and southern Libya, has allowed the Russians to open and operate 4 air bases across his controlled territory in Libya in exchange for Russia's military support to his side in the country's civil war, which the Russians spent 2024 expanding and building up their aircraft and troop presences in. These air bases and Haftar's territory in Libya being critical to supporting Russia's operations throughout the rest of Africa, giving Russia an arc of continuous power projection that their aircraft transporting mercenaries and arms could take from Russia to Hmeimim in Syria to the air bases in Libya, and then to locations throughout the African interior and vice versa in the other direction with gold and diamonds and other valuable minerals. If Russia lost their access to Hmeimim in Syria, though, it would interrupt this entire logistics corridor by severing the link in the center. Rather than using Hmeimim as a logistical stopover point between Russia and Libya, Russian aircraft would have to fly non-stop between Russia and Libya, which would greatly increase their costs and complexity by requiring more fuel for each flight. Historically, Russia has also used the Libyan port of Tobruk under Haftar's control to transport materiel and personnel towards their air bases deeper in the country. And now, faced with the potential loss of the Tartus naval base in Syria, Russia may attempt to pressure Haftar into allowing the Russians to expand their naval presence in Tobruk into a more permanent naval base that could replace Tartus. But even if he agreed, it would take years to construct the required onshore infrastructure there to support as large of a fleet as the Russians originally had stationed in Tartus. And it would also result in significant diplomatic pushback from NATO and the United States, who sort of support Haftar's faction in Libya as well. So it's unclear if that would even be a possible move for Russia to pursue, which means that with the loss of Tartus and Turkey obstructing the Turkish Straits to Russian warships coming from the Black Sea, Russia will find it immensely more challenging to support and resupply their position in Libya by sea, just like how they'll also find it more costly and challenging to support and resupply it by air with the loss of Hmeimim in Syria. This is all very complicated because it means with the loss of the bases in Syria, Russia will find itself coming to rely more on their bases in Libya and their relationship with Haftar, while they'll also find themselves in a weaker position to support those bases and to continue that relationship. And similar to the situation in Syria, where Russia and Turkey found themselves supporting opposite sides during that civil war, Turkey also heavily supports the opposite side in Libya and backs the government of national unity that's based in Tripoli. In Syria, the Turkish-backed rebels there sensed Russia's weakness as they focused everything on their all-consuming war in Ukraine, and they launched their attack against the Russian-backed Assad government, confident that Russia was too distracted and occupied by Ukraine to intervene effectively. Now in Libya, with Russia still heavily concentrated on trying to swallow Ukraine and with the probable loss of Russia's bases in Syria that'll complicate their ability to continue supporting Haftar's government, could it be possible that Turkey, confident after their decisive victory supporting the winning side in Syria, will also encourage the side they support in Libya to begin another renewed offensive against the Russian-backed side there, too? For several years since 2020, the civil war in Libya has remained frozen in place between Haftar in the east and the south and the Tripoli-based government in the west, largely because of an understanding between the respective outside supporters. While the Syrian civil war was also frozen between 2020 and the end of 2024, the Turkish-backed HTS rebel faction of the country was holed up and appeared to be cornered within Syria's Idlib province. 3 million Syrians lived there for years under HTS control, and the Turks dreaded the thought of Russia and the Assad regime launching a renewed offensive into Idlib that had the potential of unleashing hundreds of thousands of refugees spilling across the border into Turkey. Thus, if the Turks encourage their side in Libya to launch a renewed offensive against Russia's side, then Russia can authorize their side in Syria to launch a renewed offensive against Turkey's side in Idlib, and spark that massive humanitarian disaster on Turkey's doorstep. But now, with the Assad regime in Syria toppled and the government there in the hands of the Turkish-backed HTS, Russia's leverage over Turkey that they used to have in Idlib has been completely lost. And so is the understanding between them in Libya, meaning that Turkey probably feels emboldened to press their advantage and momentum in Libya next. If they end up doing that, and Russia finds it too difficult to save Haftar next, and Libya comes fully under a Turkish-backed government too, it would firmly eliminate Russia's military presence everywhere on NATO's southern flank. It'll free up Libya's oil reserves for unrestricted export back to Europe again at the expense of Russia's supplies, and it'll completely and irrevocably cripple Russia's military operations in Africa. It'll sever one of the most important methods of evading Western sanctions with African gold and diamonds. Russia cannot afford to let Haftar fall next after Assad, but without Assad, they'll also find it much more difficult to keep hanging on to him. Turkey has long supported the Tripoli-based government in Libya because they agreed to become the first country in the world to recognize Turkey's maritime claims in the eastern Mediterranean. With the victory of HTS in Syria that Turkey backed, it stands to reason that the new Turkish-friendly government in Syria will also eventually extend the recognition of Turkey's maritime claims in the region as well. And if they succeed in toppling Haftar in Libya next, Turkey will have suddenly secured 3 countries in the eastern Mediterranean that will recognize their maritime claims in the region against the opposition of Greece, Cyprus, and Egypt. And so the legitimacy of the Turkish maritime claims will be greatly strengthened. That is the incentive that Turkey has to twist the knife into Russia's side in Libya next, and why I wouldn't be surprised if they at least tried. And this would be even further advantageous to Turkey and detrimental to Russia. For years, following major offshore natural gas discoveries in the maritime zones of Israel, Cyprus, and Egypt in the later 2010s, an alliance of countries consisting of those 3 plus Greece, Jordan, Italy, and France have pursued a major infrastructure project known as the Eastern Mediterranean Pipeline, or EastMed. If it's ever completed, EastMed would be capable of transporting about 10 billion cubic meters of gas per year to the European market from Cyprus, Israel, and Egypt, equivalent to about 3% of the EU's entire consumption of gas in 2023. The alliance also firmly rejects Turkey's maritime claims in the Eastern Mediterranean that would overlap with the planned route of the pipeline between Cyprus and the Greek island of Crete, while the pipeline would also completely circumvent all Turkish territory. Naturally then, Turkey is opposed to this alliance and to the EastMed project as it's currently envisioned. The project has already been indefinitely stalled since the United States withdrew its support for it in 2022. But if Turkey could push out Haftar from Libya and secure both Libya and Syria's support for their maritime claims in the region, Turkey would acquire the leverage to try and force the EastMed countries into rerouting the pipeline overland instead through Syria. This was never really a possible option until right this very moment, because nobody would have routed the pipeline through Syria while it was still an active war zone. If Turkey and their supported side in Syria can manage to stabilize the country, though, they can present the option of rerouting the pipeline from Cyprus, Egypt, and Israel through Syria to link up with Turkey's already existing gas infrastructure onwards to Europe, which would further undermine Russia's energy leverage over Europe in the process. And that's nothing compared to another, even larger possibility to further undermine Russia's energy influence in Europe that's been presented by the collapse of the Assad regime as well. The largest natural gas field ever discovered in the entire world by orders of magnitude is the South Pars North Dome field located in the center of the Persian Gulf between Iran and Qatar. This field is so enormous, it alone contains more gas reserves than the next 10 largest gas fields ever discovered all combined. The field became the foundation of the Qatari state's modern colossal gas industry, and how the little country was able to become the third largest natural gas exporter in the world, behind only Russia and the United States. However, Qatar has always been restricted by how much gas they can actually export out of the field because the country doesn't have any pipelines that can carry the gas out to markets over land. All of Qatar's natural gas exports are done through liquefied natural gas or LNG exports instead, where the gas is supercooled into its liquid form and loaded onto ships with refrigerated containers for transportation around the world. To put the scale of the advantage of pipelines into context, Norway is currently able to export nearly as much gas as Qatar does abroad, despite having reserves that are only about 7% the size of Qatar's reserves. Because, unlike Qatar, Norway has a web of pipelines that they use reliably and constantly transport gas to Europe through. If Qatar had pipelines that connected its world-leading reserves of gas to Europe, it could theoretically supply all of Europe's current gas needs all on its own for an entire century, which would probably be long enough to carry Europe all the way through towards full decarbonization. In the late 2000s, Turkey and Qatar began establishing an alliance between them across the Middle East, owing to their government's mutual support of political Islamism in the region. And in 2009, they first suggested the concept of building out a massive gas pipeline from Qatar through Turkey and onwards to the market in Europe. However, in order for the pipeline to actually reach Turkey from Qatar, there were only two possible geographic options to choose between. The pipeline could either be routed through Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Iraq towards Turkey, or it could be routed through Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Syria towards Turkey. The first option through Iraq was immediately discarded over that country's chronic instability at the time, and so the route through Syria was the one that became the most heavily pursued. However, the Assad government in Syria quickly rejected the whole idea and refused to consider routing the pipeline through their territory at all, even though they would have received lucrative transit fees if they had agreed to it. And they almost certainly rejected it because they were pressured into rejecting it by their patron Russia, who feared how badly a massive gas pipeline from Qatar into Europe would reduce their own energy leverage over Europe in the process. And this was another massive, though less discussed reason why the Russians so heavily supported Assad during the later civil war in the country, in order to guarantee that they would keep blocking Syria's space off of the board for this pipeline into Europe from Qatar. And so the Qatar-Turkey gas pipeline proposal was indefinitely shelved, and multiple geopolitical issues in the region kept it shelved for the past 15 years. Syria collapsed into a civil war that further kept its territory off limits. Iraq continued to remain chronically unstable, while Saudi Arabia even blockaded Qatar for years between 2017 and 2021. They kept its territory off limits to any potential Qatari pipelines as well. But the Saudi blockade ended in 2021, and now with the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria and the installment into power there of a government backed by both Turkey and Qatar, the prospect of opening Syria's space on the board back up to the Qatari pipeline to Europe has emerged once again. And this is how the collapse of Assad in Syria could end up most catastrophically hurting the Russians. It only took 2 days after Assad had fled the country for the Turkish energy minister, Alparslan Bayraktar, to publicly suggest that the Qatar pipeline project could soon become revived once again, were Syria to achieve its territorial integrity and stability, which Turkey will no doubt attempt and support even with military action against any remaining rebel forces in Syria who are opposed to HTS. If Syria is able to be secured and stabilized in the future, then the Qatar gas pipeline project routed through Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Syria to Turkey and onwards to Europe could soon become an actual reality. And if that happens, Europe will never, ever again have to buy a single drop of natural gas from Russia, and the Kremlin will lose all of its remaining energy leverage over Europe. There are some in Russia who hope that in the future, after the war in Ukraine is concluded one way or another, the Europeans will eventually return back to business as usual with Russia and resume purchasing massive amounts of their natural gas again. But if they had this pipeline from Qatar, the Europeans would have the choice of just never doing that, and never finding themselves reliant on Russian energy and susceptible to Russian influence and pressure again. Instead of Russia being the most important link to Europe's gas supply, Turkey is attempting to position itself as that most important link instead. They're steadily becoming the invaluable crossroads between the marketplace in Europe and the gas supplies located all around them. They already, across their territory, carry pipelines into Europe from Azerbaijan, Iran, northern Iraq, and Russia. And in the future, they may add these additional pipelines from Cyprus, Israel, Egypt, and Qatar. And in the process, they will become the arbiter of Europe's gas supply, and they will establish the energy leverage over Europe that Russia used to have. Ultimately, the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria has been absolutely catastrophic for the ambitions of both Iran and of Russia, and the full implications for them will play out slowly over the next several years. But I expect that they'll generally follow the course of events that I explained here. The rebel offensive in Syria itself that overthrew Assad, and that was spearheaded by HTS and other Turkish-backed rebels in the country, proved to be, probably, the single most shocking geopolitical development of the entire year in 2024. Hardly anybody was expecting that the Assad dynasty in the country that had lasted for 54 years, which had survived through devastating blows during the past 13 years of the Syrian civil war, would collapse so rapidly in only 11 days after the offensive began. But there were several reasons why that happened. Assad himself was more isolated and exposed than he had ever been before, with all of his outside allies that historically supported his regime heavily preoccupied with their own affairs. The 4 years of general calm in Syria that was maintained since 2020 probably led to an expectation in Syria of a return to normalcy that Assad was never able to deliver on, leading to a demoralized and increasingly unsupported population and armed forces. And in this video's next part, I will explain all of this to you in full detail. How and why Assad's regime collapsed so rapidly, and what exactly took place during those 11 days that the rebels stormed through the whole country and forced Assad himself to flee into exile in Russia. But unfortunately, due to the inherently violent, controversial, and recent nature of discussing this offensive that covers themes like terrorism, extremism, the Assad regime's extensive use of death camps and torture, and rampant crimes against humanity, this next part of the video explaining all of that to you will cause the rest of the video before it to become demonetized and age restricted, which ultimately would mean that YouTube's algorithm would have never promoted any of this video to you, and you probably never would have seen any of it as a result. But thankfully, I was still able to produce the next part of this video anyway because of the power of this video's sponsor, Nebula, where you can go and watch the next 40-minute part covering exactly how the rebel offensive in Syria transpired, and why it ended up being so unexpectedly decisive and victorious in outcome. And this is also just one of more than several dozen exclusive, full-length real-life war videos that you can only find on Nebula in my overall Modern Conflict series there, which can all only be found over there because of all of their darker, more controversial subject material. That means that there's a bunch of other previous episodes that you can also go and watch right now that were very relevant to this video too, like this episode covering the general overview of the whole Syrian civil war from its start in 2011 to its ceasefire in 2020. This episode that focuses exclusively on the Russian military intervention into Syria. This episode that concentrates on the biggest battle of the civil war that was fought over Aleppo. These episodes that cover the rise and fall of ISIS in Syria. Or this episode that focuses on the conflict between Turkey and the Kurds of the region. All of which will help give you an incredible amount of context into what just happened in Syria and why. And what's even more, you also get access to all of the other amazing exclusive content that's available on Nebula too. Because the best part about this site is that it's jointly co-owned by all of its creators, built by myself and hundreds of other independent YouTubers and podcasters. And because it's a subscription-based service, we all get to work on way bigger and higher budget productions over there than we could ever do on our own on YouTube. That's why there's tons of other exclusive content that you'll find equally fascinating from all of these other creators over there who you probably also already know as well. Best of all, if you sign up by clicking the button that's here on your screen right now, or by following the link that's down below in the description, you'll receive an insane 40% discount off of an annual subscription, which means it'll only cost you $3 a month or $36 a year for all of this awesome exclusive content from myself and hundreds of other independent creators, with even more stuff getting added by me and everyone else every single month. And if you already have a Nebula subscription and you want to gift one to a friend or a loved one, you can now do that as well with a gifted subscription with the same discount by following the link that's down below in the description as well. This is the absolute best way to help support what I'm doing here on Real Life Lore. And as always, thank you so much for watching. This video was made possible by Nebula. Use the link down in the description below to support Real Life Lore directly by signing up, where you can watch dozens of additional and exclusive full-length videos of my ongoing Nebula Modern Conflict series that covers recent major wars and crises, including this video's next part, covering the entire history of the Lebanon Civil War and the previous 2006 Israel-Hezbollah War, which will provide vital context that is very important to understanding the current conflict going on today. On October 7th, 2023, Hamas and other Palestinian militant groups within the Gaza Strip launched a devastating surprise attack on Israel that killed more than 1,200 Israelis and took more than 200 more as hostages. In the aftermath of that attack, Israel issued a formal declaration of war against Hamas, mobilized more than 300,000 soldiers from their reserves, ordered the evacuation of all Israeli civilians from around the Gaza Strip, and initiated a complete land, sea, and air blockade of the Gaza Strip itself that has restricted food, fuel, water, and medical supplies from getting in. From there, the war has been carried out in a series of phases from the Israeli perspective. In the first phase, the Israeli Air Force initiated a punishing 3-week-long aerial bombing campaign across the entire Gaza Strip, with the stated aims of destroying Hamas's infrastructure and giving Israel's own troops enough time to assemble and prepare for the upcoming ground invasion that was aimed at toppling Hamas's government in the Gaza Strip. Israel then ordered that the entire population in the northern section of the Gaza Strip be evacuated. And then on October 27th, the Israelis began the second phase of the war, a full-scale ground invasion into the northern Gaza Strip that they had ordered to be evacuated. Their strategy was to use the invasion to slice the Gaza Strip into two, push as many Palestinian civilians as possible towards the south, and attack isolated Hamas forces encircled in the north. As of this video's production, this second phase of Israel's war is beginning to wrap up, with Israeli military control largely secured across most of the northern Gaza Strip, and Gaza City itself rendered to a shattered ghost town. And already, the consequences for the Palestinians within the Gaza Strip have been absolutely catastrophic. The Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministries reported that more than 14,000 Palestinians within the Gaza Strip have died since the war began, a statistic that represents the deaths of more than 1 in every 200 people who had lived there. And among those deaths include at least 5,500 children. A fact that makes the current conflict the deadliest war for children that has been fought in modern history. Around 1.5 million Palestinians, or about 70% of the Gaza Strip's population, have been internally displaced from their homes amidst the heavy fighting in the north of the Strip, and they have nearly all been pushed together into the southern end of the Strip, an area that was already, even before the war, one of the most densely populated places on the planet, and which is now arguably the single most densely packed place in the entire world, as they have nowhere else to go beyond Israel and Egypt's blockade and the Mediterranean Sea. And now, with the northern Gaza Strip largely secured by the Israeli military, Israel is contemplating when to initiate their third phase of the war, expanding the ground invasion towards the southern Gaza Strip and securing total control over the entire area. But this next phase will be fraught with incredible dangers. Hamas is believed to operate a vast and complex network of tunnels, hundreds of kilometers long beneath the entire Gaza Strip, a system that has sometimes been referred to as the Gaza Metro. Hamas's chief political leader still residing in the Gaza Strip, Yahya Sinwar, is believed to currently be hiding somewhere in these tunnels beneath his hometown of Khan Yunis in the southern Gaza Strip, along with a significant number of the hostages that were seized on October 7th. And so, in order to fully destroy Hamas and rescue all of their hostages, the two primary stated war aims of the Israelis, they will have to eventually invade the southern Gaza Strip